Before computer graphics existed, if you wanted a dogfight on screen, you put real pilots in real planes and told them not to die. These are the 10 best aviation movies ever made, and not a single one of them could be made today. This is a comedy set right at the beginning of aviation. Those were the times when flying across the English Channel was still considered completely insane. The whole movie is built around this massive air race with an international cast of characters. What makes this movie special is the planes. The crew actually built about 20 replica aircraft using the same materials they used back in 1910. Obviously, they upgraded the engines a bit so nobody would die, but even with those upgrades, flying these things was genuinely dangerous. You can actually feel that when you watch it. These machines look like they're about to fall apart at any second. And they even worked 2 actual vintage planes into the film, a 1910 Deperdussin monoplane and a 1912 Blackburn Type D monoplane. The whole thing is just pure entertainment and a tribute to those early aviation pioneers. This is one of those rare World War II movies that actually gets it right. The co-writer, Baron Lay Jr., lived through the real thing. He flew bomber missions. And that's why the whole movie feels authentic in a way most war films don't. Gregory Peck gives one of his best performances leading a bomber group that's falling apart under pressure. But this isn't really about the planes. Even though there are plenty of real B-17s and tons of actual combat footage, it's about what command actually looks like. The burden of it, the psychological toll, the decisions nobody wants to make. And the best thing is, the movie completely skips the forced romance plot that every war film feels like it needs. No love interest shoehorned in here, so everything's tighter and more focused. It's just about leadership and what it costs. Honestly, anyone in charge of anything should probably watch this movie. Wings is the first movie to ever win Best Picture at the Oscars. We're going all the way back to 1927 here. The director was William Wellman, and he wasn't some Hollywood guy faking it. He actually flew for the Lafayette Flying Corps in World War I. After the war, he worked his way up in Hollywood from the very bottom. When it came time to make this movie, his connections got the production access to more than 220 planes, MB-3A Scouts, Curtiss P-1 Hawks, even some genuine World War I fighters. It's a silent film, so yeah, you get the era's typical goofy love triangle with Buddy Rogers, Richard Arlen, and Clara Bow, but almost everyone involved was a real pilot except Bow, and they didn't fake the flying. There's a shot where Buddy Rogers is actually flying a Thomas Morse himself. Howard Hughes made this one, and the guy was obsessed with one thing, scale. He wanted to put on the biggest aviation show the world had ever seen. The acting is pretty terrible and the story's forgettable, but Hughes didn't care about that. He was filling the sky with real World War I planes. He even retrofitted a Curtiss Jenny to make it look like an Avro 504 just for formation shots. Most of the movie isn't even about flying, but the parts that are, those dogfights and Zeppelin sequences, they're still pretty awesome even now. Hughes did studio work with the Zeppelin that honestly looks better than a lot of CGI today, and those big dogfight scenes have been chopped up and reused for decades. You've seen clips from Hell's Angels and war documentaries and other movies and probably didn't even know it. The movie's a mess as a story, but as a spectacle of what you could do with real planes and a bottomless budget, it's incredible. Sometimes a movie is all about how it looks and feels in the air. Strategic Air Command is that movie. You get these incredible aerial shots of the Convair B-36 and Boeing B-47, some of the best aviation footage ever put on film. Jimmy Stewart was in this, and the guy was an experienced pilot in real life, so he brings actual realism to every scene. The story was written by Baron Lay, the same guy who wrote 12 O'Clock High. It's fine, but the plot mostly exists to string together the flying sequences. June Allison shows up doing her usual long-suffering pilot's wife routine, which is about as irritating as always. But this movie earned its spot here almost entirely because of the flying, the dedication it shows to the real-world pilots of the Strategic Air Command, and just how beautiful it makes these massive aircraft look. The Blue Max is another World War I movie, but it was a big deal because it was the first time anyone did war aviation in color. Just seeing those replica false fighters in the air was huge back then. The cinematography is next level. George Peppard plays it stone-faced like always, and Ursula Andress is there to liven things up. But the story has a great angle. It's about the rivalry between aristocrats and commoners inside a German fighter squadron. And that actually feels real because historically a lot of those pilots weren't officers. They were just guys who could fly. The flying sequences are gorgeous, and the class tension makes it more interesting than your typical war movie. And also, just seeing World War I aviation in color for the first time was a genuine game changer. Battle of Britain is one of those rare movies where you can actually see the insane effort they put into making it. The producers didn't mess around with miniatures or special effects tricks. They went out and gathered real Hurricanes, real Messerschmitts, and real Spitfires. Aviation fans will of course tell you that most of those German planes actually came from the Spanish Air Force and were running on Merlin engines instead of the original German ones. But honestly, nobody cared. When you've got that many real warplanes in the air at once, the spectacle just works. They shot the ground scenes at Duxford, which added a ton of realism, and for one sequence they burned down an actual World War II hangar. There's still a plaque at Duxford today marking where it used to stand. The cast was stacked too. Laurence Olivier playing Air Chief Marshal Dowding, and the whole plot pulled straight from a legit book on the subject called The Narrow Margin. The special effects hold up even now, which is pretty impressive for 1969. Back in the 50s and 60s, the UK had this thing they did really well. Straightforward, patriotic airplane movies that actually put real planes on screen. The Dam Busters and 633 Squadron are perfect examples. The Dam Busters had a problem right from the start. There weren't many surviving Lancasters left, so they had to blend in some actual wartime footage to fill it out. But I gotta hand it to those guys. They took something really complicated, the physics behind the bouncing bomb, and they explained it in a way that's not just clear, it's genuinely exciting to watch. Then you've got 633 Squadron with Cliff Robertson. He fit right into the role, and you could tell he was genuinely into flying the Mosquito. The whole thing just feels solid on a technical level, made with real care. And they even burned an airworthy Mosquito for the film. Even now, decades later, that's painful for anyone who loves these planes. Both films just had this level of dedication you don't always see. This one goes way deeper than just jets and explosions. The setup drops you onto World War II era carriers, except now it's Korea and the flying is even more dangerous than before. The Navy went all in on this production. They gave the filmmakers 19 ships, so what you're seeing on screen is the real deal, actual flight operations, that sense of just how risky these missions actually were. The story follows VF-51 naval aviators. If that sounds familiar, it's because that's the same group Neil Armstrong flew with in real life. The whole movie centers on one mission: destroy the bridges at Toko-Ri, cut off enemy supply lines, and try to get everyone back alive. It's based on a James Michener novel, and it ends up being a lot more than just an action movie. For its time, the bridges at Toko-Ri was pretty ambitious, and it's still one of the strongest tributes out there to the pilots who flew these missions and the rescue teams who tried to bring them home. The High and the Mighty is the classic aviation disaster movie. William Wellman directed it, and Ernest Gann wrote both the book and the screenplay. Gann was an aviator and a sailor first, author second, so everything came straight from someone who actually understood what flying meant. The plot's simple. There's a commercial flight crossing the Pacific, engine trouble hits, the pilot loses his nerve, and everything comes down to Dan Roman, the washed-up co-pilot, to land the plane and keep everyone alive. John Wayne ended up starring in this movie almost by accident. Spencer Tracy was supposed to play Dan Roman, but he bailed at the last minute. Wayne was already bankrolling the whole production, so when Tracy walked, Wayne had to jump into the role himself to keep the movie from collapsing completely. It ended up being one of the best performances of his entire career. For decades after Wayne died, you couldn't watch The High and the Mighty anywhere. All the rights got tied up and the movie just disappeared. Nobody could see it for years. It finally came back in 2005 after the Wayne estate did a massive restoration effort. They found a lost reel, cleaned everything up, and released it on home video. The acting style feels a bit old school now, a little dated, but the payoff still works, and the ending holds up even for people who know what a real emergency landing looks like.